Most people don't realize it, but the trap isn't failure. It's the feeling of progress without actually moving. You ever sit there, phone in your hand, coffee getting cold on the table, telling yourself, just one more video, like you're about to unlock something that finally makes everything click? Yeah, we've all been there. And here's the uncomfortable part. Your brain doesn't really know the difference between watching someone else do the work and you actually doing it. It rewards you anyway, a little hit of satisfaction, a quiet voice that says, "Good job, you're trying." But you're not trying, you're watching. There's a guy out there right now, same age as you, maybe even less talented, not smarter, not more motivated, but he's further ahead. Not by luck, not by some hidden advantage. He just got tired of confusing motion with progress. While you're stacking bookmarks, he's stacking results. While you're collecting ideas, he's dealing with consequences. And consequences, those are the real teachers. See, we live in a time where information is everywhere. You don't have to look for it. It finds you. It follows you into bed, into the bathroom, into those quiet 5 minutes you used to spend just thinking. Now it fills every gap, every silence. And it feels productive, doesn't it? You watch something about discipline. Suddenly you feel a little more disciplined. You listen to a podcast about success. Suddenly you feel like you're on the right path. But then the day ends, and nothing actually changed. Same habits, same patterns, same quiet frustration sitting there like a bill you keep ignoring. The truth is, you don't need another system, another routine, another morning formula. You already know more than enough. You know you should wake up earlier, move your body, focus on your work, cut distractions, follow through. None of that is new. None of that is hidden. So why does it still feel like you're stuck? Because knowing builds comfort. Doing builds resistance. And most people, without realizing it, choose comfort every single day. It's subtle. It doesn't look like laziness. It looks like preparation. It looks like, I'm just learning a bit more before I start. But that before I start can stretch for months, even years. You keep circling the same ideas, the same advice, the same videos, like walking around the entrance of a gym without ever stepping inside. And the longer you stay there, the harder it gets to walk in. Because now you're not just starting, you're admitting you've been delaying, and that stings. So instead, you watch another video. Feels easier, feels safer. But safety has a cost. It keeps your life exactly where it is. And here's the part that really gets people. Your brain is actually working against you here. It loves easy rewards. It loves quick wins. Watching feels like a win. Starting feels like risk. What if you fail? What if you're not as good as you thought? What if all that content you consumed doesn't translate into anything real? So you delay, you prepare, you tell yourself you're being smart about it. But deep down, there's this quiet awareness, a small voice that shows up late at night, when everything's quiet, asking a simple question. What did you actually do today? Not what you watched, not what you planned, not what you intended, what you did. And most days, that answer feels a little too light. That's the gap between consumption and creation, between feeling ready and actually being in motion. And the longer you stay in that gap, the more normal it starts to feel. You stop expecting real progress. You settle for the idea of it. You start measuring your days by how much you've taken in, not how much you've built. And that's where people get stuck for years without realizing it. Because from the outside, it looks like effort. You're busy, you're engaged, you're always working on yourself. But inside, nothing is shifting. No weight being lifted, no real friction, no proof, just a loop. And breaking that loop doesn't start with a big decision. It starts with something smaller, almost uncomfortable in its simplicity. It starts with admitting that maybe, just maybe, you don't need more information. Maybe what you need is to finally sit with the silence, put the phone down, and face the work that's been waiting for you all along. Daniel wasn't the kind of guy people noticed. If you passed him on the street, you wouldn't turn your head. He moved like everyone else, same rushed mornings, same tired eyes on the bus, same quiet habit of checking his phone before his feet even touched the floor. His alarm would go off at 6:30, not because he loved mornings, but because he kept promising himself that tomorrow would be different. Most mornings, it wasn't. He'd lie there for a minute, thumb already scrolling before his brain fully woke up, watching clips about discipline, routines, men waking up at 5 a.m., cold showers, perfect lives stitched together in 60 seconds. For a moment, he'd feel it, that spark, that sense that today might actually be the day he gets his life together. Then he'd blink, and 20 minutes would be gone. Now he's late. Again. Coffee becomes something he grabs instead of something he enjoys. Shirt half tucked, mind already cluttered before the day even starts. Work wasn't terrible, but it wasn't something he was proud of either. Just a desk, a screen, a steady stream of tasks that felt important while he was doing them, and meaningless the second he stopped. Around him, the office had its own rhythm. You could hear it in the tapping keyboards, the polite laughs, the quiet sighs when someone thought no one was listening. Lunch break was always the same. People gathered, but not really together. Everyone had their own little world glowing in their hands, videos playing, podcasts talking, advice being handed out by people who looked like they had everything figured out. Daniel fit right into that scene. Headphones in, eyes focused, saving clips like he was building a library for a future version of himself. Watch this later. Try this tomorrow. This might change things. His saved folder kept growing. So did his sense that he was doing something useful. But when the day ended and he walked back through those same crowded streets, past the same intersections where people rushed like they were chasing something just out of reach, there was always this quiet weight sitting in his chest. Not heavy enough to break him, just enough to remind him something wasn't right. Evenings were supposed to be his time. That's what he told himself. After dinner, after a quick break, that's when he'd focus on building something. A skill, a project, something that moved his life forward. But evenings have a way of slipping through your fingers. He'd sit down just for a bit, open his phone, check something small, and then fall right back into it. Another video, another explanation, another person breaking down success into steps that made it sound simple. He'd nod along, sometimes even pause to think, yeah, that makes sense. And in that moment, it felt like progress, like he was getting closer. But the clock didn't care about that feeling. Hours passed the same way they always did, quietly. By the time he looked up, it was late, again. The energy he thought he had was gone. The plan he made earlier felt distant. "I'll start tomorrow," he'd say, not with excitement, but with a kind of tired agreement. Tomorrow became this place where everything finally worked, where he had more energy, more focus, more discipline. But tomorrow never really changed. It just kept arriving, looking exactly like today. Weekends were supposed to fix things. More time, fewer excuses. Saturday mornings had potential. He'd wake up a little slower, sit with his coffee, and feel that familiar urge to reset. This time, he'd get it right. He'd even write things down sometimes. A small list, nothing crazy, just enough to feel organized. But somewhere between the first video to get in the mood and the second one for clarity, that same pattern crept back in. The line between preparing and avoiding blurred so easily, he didn't even notice it happening. Afternoon would roll around, and the list would still be sitting there, untouched, not ignored, just postponed. Always postponed. And the strange thing was, Daniel didn't think of himself as lazy. He wasn't avoiding life, he cared. That's what made it heavier. He wanted more, wanted to feel like his days meant something. But wanting doesn't move anything. Action does. And action, that's where things kept falling apart. One evening, nothing special happened. No big failure, no dramatic moment. Just a quiet, ordinary night. He got home, sat down, opened his phone, and stopped. Not because he suddenly became disciplined. More like he noticed something he couldn't unsee. His thumb hovered over the screen, ready to tap, and for a second, he saw the pattern. Same motion, same habit, same outcome. It felt predictable, like he already knew how the next 2 hours would play out. And that realization, it didn't motivate him. It annoyed him. Not loud, not explosive, just a low, steady frustration. The kind that builds when you realize you've been repeating the same day in different clothes. He put the phone down, not dramatically, just set it on the table like it weighed more than usual. The room felt quieter than normal. No background noise, no voices telling him what to do next. Just him, and the space he usually filled. That's when the discomfort showed up. Not pain, not fear, just a strange emptiness. Like standing in a room you've always rushed through, and finally noticing how still it is. He didn't suddenly jump into action. That's not how it works. He sat there for a while, looked around, thought about all the things he said he wanted to do, and how little of them actually got done. It wasn't dramatic, no big speech, just a simple thought, almost blunt in the way it landed. This isn't working. And for once, he didn't try to fix it with more information. He didn't reach for another video to explain why he felt this way. He just stayed there, letting the thought sit, letting it be uncomfortable. That night, he didn't change his life. He didn't build something incredible or suddenly become a different person. He just did one small thing, something so basic it almost felt pointless. He picked one task, not 10, not a full plan, just one. And he did it, slowly, without music, without switching tabs, without stopping halfway to check something else. It felt awkward, like using a muscle he hadn't touched in a long time. His mind wandered, his body resisted. Part of him kept whispering, "This isn't enough, you should be doing more," but he stayed with it, finished it. And when it was done, nothing magical happened. No rush, no sudden clarity, just a quiet sense that something shifted. Small, but real. That night when he went to bed, the question showed up again, the same one that used to bother him. What did you actually do today? And for once, he had an answer. Not a big one, not impressive, but honest. And somehow, that felt different. If this were the kind of story people like to tell online, this is where Daniel would flip a switch and become a different man overnight. Wake up before sunrise, run miles, build a business in a few months, and somehow stay locked in like a machine that never breaks. But that's not how it unfolded. The truth is quieter than that, and a little more uncomfortable. Because what changed for Daniel wasn't his discipline, not at first. It was the way he started looking at his own life. See, most people think they fail because they lack willpower, like there's something weak inside them that needs to be fixed. Daniel used to think that too. Every time he slipped back into old habits, every time he chose comfort over action, he'd tell himself the same story. I just need to be stronger. But the more he paid attention, the more that explanation stopped making sense. Because if it was really about strength, why did it feel so easy to fall back into the same patterns? Why did the path of least resistance always win, even on days when he genuinely wanted to do better? One evening, after another long day that looked productive on paper but felt empty in reality, he sat at his desk and didn't reach for his phone. Not because he suddenly had control, but because he started noticing something he had ignored for a long time. Everything around him was designed to pull him away from what mattered. The phone wasn't just a tool, it was a magnet. The apps weren't neutral, they were built to keep him there. Even the way his room was set up, bed too close to his desk, notifications always within reach, snacks sitting right where his eyes could see them. None of it was random. It was all quietly shaping his behavior, nudging him in a direction he never consciously chose. And that's when the idea hit him, not like a burst of motivation, but more like a realization you can't undo once you see it clearly. Maybe he wasn't the problem. Maybe the system around him was. That thought didn't make him feel better. In fact, it made things a bit heavier, because it meant the solution wasn't going to come from some internal spark or sudden burst of discipline. It meant he had to change the way his life was structured, piece by piece, like rearranging a room you've lived in for years without questioning why anything is where it is. The next morning, nothing dramatic happened. The alarm went off like always. His body resisted like always. The urge to grab his phone was still there, just as strong. But this time, instead of trying to fight the urge, he changed the situation. The night before, he had left his phone in the other room, not as a test of strength, but as a way to remove the decision entirely. When the alarm rang, he had to get up to turn it off. That small action, just standing up, broke the usual chain. There was no scrolling in bed, no slow drift into distraction, just a quiet room and a body that was now awake, whether it liked it or not. It felt strange, almost too simple, but that was the point. He wasn't trying to win a battle against himself anymore. He was trying to avoid the battle altogether. Over the next few days, he kept doing that. Not perfectly, not consistently in the beginning, but enough to notice a pattern. When the environment made things easy, he followed through. When it didn't, he slipped. It wasn't about motivation, it was about friction. If something required too many decisions, too much resistance, he avoided it. If it was right there, obvious, almost automatic, he did it without thinking too much. That realization changed the way he approached everything. Instead of asking, "How do I become more disciplined?" he started asking, "How do I make this easier to start?" Work became something he prepared for the night before. Laptop open, notes ready, distractions removed before he even sat down. The goal wasn't to feel ready, it was to remove excuses. Even his workouts shifted. He didn't aim for long, intense sessions anymore. He set up something small, almost laughable at first, just enough that starting didn't feel like a big decision. And once he started, continuing became easier than stopping. It wasn't impressive. No one would look at it and think, "This guy is changing his life." But that wasn't the point. The real shift was happening underneath. For the first time, he wasn't relying on how he felt to determine what he did. He was shaping his surroundings so that the default action was the right one. And that's where things got interesting. Because once he removed the constant pull of distraction, something else showed up. Silence. Not the peaceful kind you see in movies, the uncomfortable kind. The kind that forces you to sit with your own thoughts, your own resistance, your own excuses without anything to drown them out. At first, it was hard. His mind would look for ways to escape, to reach for something, anything that could fill that space again. But slowly, that silence started to change. It became a place where he could actually see what was going on inside him, not filtered through someone else's voice, not shaped by someone else's idea of what his life should look like. And in that space, he realized something most people don't talk about. Consuming all that content, it wasn't just about learning. It was a way to avoid facing the reality of his own situation. As long as he was watching, listening, preparing, he didn't have to confront the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be. He could stay in a kind of mental rehearsal, always about to start, never fully stepping into the risk of doing something that might not work. Once that layer was gone, there was nowhere to hide. If he didn't act, it was obvious. If he wasted time, he felt it immediately. There was no illusion to soften it. And strangely, that clarity didn't break him. It grounded him, because now the problem was simple. Not easy, but simple. Do the work, or don't. Move forward, or stay where you are. No more stories, no more pretending, just choices, repeated every day. And the more he leaned into that, the more he understood something that most people miss entirely. Progress isn't built on big decisions. It's built on small setups. The way your day starts, the things within arm's reach, the default actions you fall into when you're tired, distracted, or not thinking clearly. That's where your life is actually shaped. Not in those rare moments when you feel motivated enough to push hard, but in the ordinary hours when you don't feel like doing anything at all. Daniel didn't become a different person. He just stopped expecting himself to win a fight he was set up to lose. And instead, he started building a life where the right actions required less effort than the wrong ones. It sounds simple when you say it like that, almost obvious, but living it, that's where everything changes. It didn't feel like progress at first. That's the part nobody really prepares you for. You expect something, a signal, a shift, a sense that you're finally on the right track. But most days, for Daniel, it just felt quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of quiet you notice when the noise you used to rely on disappears, and suddenly there's nothing left to hide behind. He would sit at his desk at night, the same desk where weeks ago he'd scroll for hours without thinking twice, and now it looked different. Not because the desk changed, but because he did. There was no video playing in the background, no voice telling him what step came next, just a notebook, a pen, and the weight of a simple question waiting for him at the end of the day. What did you actually do today? The first few nights, that question felt heavier than he expected. He'd stare at the page longer than he wanted to admit. Because writing it down, it removed the blur. You couldn't dress it up. You couldn't count intention as action. It was either there or it wasn't. Some days the list was short, uncomfortably short. A bit of focused work, a short walk, maybe a small task he'd been putting off for weeks. And that was it. No highlight reel. No impressive streak, just proof that something happened. Other days, it was worse. He'd sit there, pen in hand, knowing he let the day slip. Not completely, not in a dramatic way. Just enough wasted time, enough small decisions that added up to nothing, that the page stayed mostly empty. And that emptiness had a way of pressing on him, not loudly, but steadily, like a mirror you can't look away from. He thought about skipping it sometimes, just closing the notebook and pretending the day didn't need to be measured. But that's the thing about awareness. Once you have it, you don't get to turn it off so easily. Even if he didn't write it down, he'd still feel it, that quiet discomfort that follows you into the night. So he kept showing up, not perfectly, not with confidence, just consistently enough that the habit started to take shape. The act of reviewing his day became less about judging himself and more about understanding patterns. He started noticing things he had never paid attention to before. The way his energy dropped at certain hours. The moments when he reached for distraction without even thinking. The tasks he avoided, not because they were hard, but because they felt unclear. It wasn't dramatic, no big revelations, just small observations stacking up over time. And those observations started to change the way he moved through his days. He didn't try to fix everything at once. That would have been too familiar, too close to the old pattern of overloading himself with plans that never lasted. Instead, he picked one thing, something small enough that he couldn't hide from it. If he noticed he kept losing focus in the afternoon, he adjusted that window. Shorter sessions, fewer expectations. If he saw that his morning slipped away too easily, he tightened the first hour. Not with intensity, but with clarity. One task, no decisions, just start. It wasn't about becoming better overnight. It was about removing the friction that made him stop. And slowly, something began to settle inside him. Not excitement, not motivation. Something quieter, a kind of steadiness. The kind you don't notice unless you've lived without it for a long time. Days started to feel more real, less blurred. When he worked, he knew he was working. When he rested, he knew he earned it. That difference, small as it sounds, changed the way time felt. It stopped slipping through his hands so easily. There were still bad days, of course there were. Days where he fell back into old habits, where the pull of distraction was stronger than usual, where he caught himself halfway through an hour of nothing and felt that familiar frustration creeping back in. But those days didn't spiral the way they used to. He didn't label himself as lazy or broken. He didn't run back to content to fix the feeling. He just wrote it down that night, faced it, saw it for what it was, a pattern, not a personality. And the next day, he adjusted. That was new. Before, failure felt like proof that something was wrong with him. Now, it felt like information. Something to work with, not something to escape from. And over time, those small adjustments started to stack, not in a way that others would notice right away. From the outside, Daniel still looked like the same guy. Same job, same routine, same quiet presence in a crowded room. But internally, the shift was undeniable. He trusted himself more, not in a loud, confident way, in a quiet, grounded way. The kind of trust that comes from keeping small promises to yourself, day after day, even when no one is watching. That trust changed how he approached everything. He stopped overthinking decisions, stopped waiting for the perfect moment. If something needed to be done, he started it. Not because he felt ready, but because he removed the need to feel ready in the first place. And that's where the real change happened. Not in what he did, but in how he related to the work. It wasn't a battle anymore. It wasn't something he had to hype himself up for. It became part of his day, like brushing his teeth or making his bed. Ordinary, predictable, almost boring, but consistent. And consistency. That's what most people never stay with long enough to see the results. Weeks passed, then months. The notebook filled up, page by page. Some entries were strong, others, not so much. But all of them told the truth. And that truth, repeated over time, gave him something no amount of content ever did. Clarity. He could see what worked. He could see what didn't. He could see where he was improving and where he was still stuck. No guesswork, no illusions, just data from his own life. And that clarity removed something he didn't even realize he was carrying, the constant feeling that he was behind. Because now, instead of comparing himself to what others were doing, he was tracking what he was actually building, step by step, day by day. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, but it was real. And real progress has weight to it. You can feel it, not in big moments, but in small ones. The way you sit down to work without hesitation, the way you finish things you start, the way your mind feels a little less scattered, a little more focused. Those changes don't show up in a highlight reel, but they change everything underneath. One night, after closing his notebook, Daniel leaned back in his chair and just sat there for a while. No rush to move, No urge to fill the silence. Just breathing, letting the day settle. And for the first time in a long time, there was no tension in that moment. No sense that he should have done more, been more, tried harder. Just a quiet recognition that he showed up, that he did what he said he would do, at least enough to move forward. It wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was honest, and somehow, that was enough. There's something people don't talk about enough. What happens after things start to work. Not the big wins, not the visible changes, but that quiet stretch in between where life doesn't feel dramatic anymore. For Daniel, that part came slowly, almost unnoticed. Days stopped feeling like something he had to fight through. They became something he moved through. Same streets, same office, same routines, but the weight shifted. The pressure to figure everything out faded into the background, replaced by something more grounded. He wasn't chasing a version of himself anymore. He was just building, one day at a time. And if you looked at his life from the outside, you might miss it. There were no sudden leaps, no moments that made people stop and say, "That's when everything changed." It was quieter than that. It showed up in how he handled small things. The way he started his mornings without negotiation. The way he didn't need to convince himself to begin. The way he stopped waiting for the right mood, the right energy, the right moment. He understood something most people keep resisting, that the perfect moment doesn't arrive. You create it by starting anyway. And once that clicked, something else followed. He stopped overvaluing intensity and started respecting consistency. No more all or nothing thinking. No more swinging between doing everything and doing nothing. Just a steady pace. Some days stronger, some days lighter, but always moving. That rhythm became his foundation. And over time, it changed how he saw himself. Not as someone trying to improve, but as someone who simply does the work. That identity didn't come from affirmations or belief. It came from repetition, quiet proof, stacked day after day. And that's where the real lesson sits, the one people usually skip because it doesn't sound exciting enough. You don't become someone new by thinking differently. You become someone new by doing things differently long enough that your mind has no choice but to catch up. Daniel didn't wake up one day feeling confident. He earned that feeling slowly, by showing himself that he could follow through even when it was inconvenient, even when no one was watching, even when the results weren't immediate. That kind of confidence doesn't fade easily, because it's built on evidence, not emotion. And here's the part that matters for you, sitting there, maybe listening to this while your own day slips by in small distractions. None of this is out of reach. It's not reserved for people with more time, more energy, more discipline. It's built on decisions so small, they almost feel insignificant in the moment. Putting your phone away for a while. Starting a task before you feel ready. Sitting with discomfort instead of escaping it. Writing down what you actually did instead of what you planned to do. These things don't look powerful. They don't give you that immediate rush, but they change the direction of your life in a way that motivation never will. Because motivation fades. It always does. It comes and goes like weather. But systems, those stay. Habits stay. The structure you build around your life, that's what carries you on the days you don't feel like moving. And if you're honest with yourself, those are the days that matter most. Anyone can act when they feel good. Anyone can start when they're inspired. But showing up when it's quiet, when it's boring, when nothing feels urgent, that's where the difference is made. So maybe the real question isn't, how do I get motivated? But maybe it's something simpler, something harder to ignore. What are you actually doing with your time? When no one's watching, when there's no pressure, when the day is just yours to use or waste. Because that's the space where your life is shaped. Not in the big decisions you think about, but in the small actions you repeat. And if you take a second to look at your own pattern, really look at it without dressing it up, you'll probably see it. The moments where you drift, the habits that pull you off track, the things you keep postponing even though you know they matter. That awareness, it's uncomfortable, but it's also where everything starts. You don't need to fix your whole life tonight. You don't need a perfect plan or a complete reset. Just pick one thing, one action that moves you forward, even a little. Do it without overthinking, without waiting. Then tomorrow, do it again. That's it. That's the path. It's not glamorous. It won't impress anyone right away. But if you stay with it, if you let those small actions stack, something shifts. Not all at once, not in a way you can show off, but in a way you can feel. And once you feel it, you won't want to go back. So here's something to carry with you after this moment ends. After you close this tab or move on to whatever comes next, pay attention to what you do next. Not what you plan, not what you intend, what you actually do. Because that one choice, small as it seems, is either keeping you where you are or quietly moving you forward. And if this way of looking at things feels different, if it cuts through the noise a little more than what you're used to hearing, then stick around. Not because there's some secret waiting for you, but because sometimes you just need to hear the truth more than once before it really lands.